Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I am Sean. Today I'm doing a review of Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep by Philip K. Dick, otherwise known as Blade Runner. First off, I do love that title, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. That's a great title. This is one of 3 books on the 1,000 Books to Read Before You Die list by James Mustich, and I've previously read Philip K. Dick's other book, The Man in the High Castle. The other book on the top 1,000 list is The Three Stigmata of Someone or Other. But anyway, so first, Man in the High Castle, I didn't really like it. I thought it was completely underwhelming in every way. Basically, The Man in the High Castle is kind of post World War II, but like alternate history where the Axis won World War II. So Germany and Japan pretty much control the whole world. And even though I really like that premise a lot, the book was just bland. All the characters were bland. The story was bland. The climax of the book was just like, what? So I just hated that book. It was just boring pretty much in every way. A complete underwhelming letdown. So I had fairly low expectations for this book, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? Blade Runner. I have never seen any of the Blade Runner movies before. So I put this book on my to-read list for this year, on my 25 books to read in 2025. But what happens in the first chapter is basically this guy wakes up, it's the main character, and what happens is basically he and his wife are taking like emotional stimulants, I guess, like just whatever kind of mood they want to be in, whether it's like happy or even depressed or whatever. They just have some kind of an injection or something, or it's almost like, like a sleep number bed where you just dial up whatever emotion you want. So if you want to have a real emotional high, or if you want to have an emotional low or whatever, I don't know exactly why people would do that, but whatever. So they're kind of arguing like, oh, I think I want to do like, I want to be depressed today or something. And then they're just kind of arguing about that, and they're just going on about that. And I'm just like, I don't know. This is just kind of weird. I'm not really enjoying this. Is this what the book is about? And from there, it kind of segued into another main plot point or whatever of this book, and that's that basically this series or whatever, this book, I don't know if it's actually a series, I don't know if he's written anything after this book or whatever, if it's just a standalone book. But the movies, there's definitely a few movies. But anyway, so the book is basically about, there's this like post like global war kind of thing. I don't know if it's actually a nuclear war, because it's kind of mentioned often that there's like dust and there's like radioactive dust, so that implies like, nuclear weapons. But there's something about in the book about how there was a different kind of weapon that they made, so I'm not exactly sure if it was nuclear or if it was just a different type of nuclear weapon or exactly what. But anyway, basically it's this, post World War apocalyptic society, but they've also kind of advanced in other ways. So there's like the human civilization on Earth, and there's also humans have colonized Mars because Earth is pretty much inhospitable now or whatever. There's all this radioactive dust and stuff. And so anyway, what I was kind of getting back to originally was a major plot point of this book is that animals are really in high demand. So if you are like really wealthy, you have an actual animal. And if you're kind of poor, you have basically a robotic animal. And so the main character is a bounty hunter, and his job is to track down androids, or in the book they call them Andes. And so this was kind of also a little bit confusing. There was like the robot company, whatever, on Earth. But it's also mentioned that I think, like, oh, I remember. If you go to Mars, you get like your own personal robot. It's kind of like your reward for leaving Earth. They kind of want to get everyone off Earth as much as possible. So if you go to Mars, if you can, there's kind of like some restrictions on if you can go. Like if you've been hit too much with radiation, they may not let you go because you're kind of, infected, whatever. But if you go to Mars, you can get an android of your own, and they're getting really advanced. So it's really hard nowadays to tell if someone is an android or if they're real. And it's the same thing with the pets. A lot of the pets are almost indistinguishable from robots. In fact, there's parts where like someone thinks they have a robot animal, but it's really a real animal. And then there's also like the reverse where someone thinks an animal is real and then it's actual a robot. But anyway, so there's robots, there's androids, and mainly they're on Mars, but there's apparently somehow they make their way to Earth, and basically if they're on Earth, they're kind of hunted down, and they're dangerous, and this is one part that I didn't really think made sense, because it's like, how exactly do they get from Mars to Earth? Like they're escaping, or are they like deliberately letting these androids go? And then there's like the android company on Earth, and they're kind of like, are they protecting all of these androids? Are they like trying to stop them, or what? There was kind of like a lot of questions I had that I just didn't really feel like I was getting answered. So that's kind of one immediate knock about the book, is there were just things going on that weren't really clear to me so much that I thought could have been better developed. I don't know how much more I want to say about the book, and it's kind of one of my main knocks against the book, is a problem I had with the book is that things seem to happen, like Philip K. Dick would have things happen that, are kind of for shock value. He's like, I'm going to have this twist or whatever. I'm going to do this. Readers won't see this coming, so I'm going to do this crazy thing or whatever. And it just didn't really feel like it was too planned out, or that it made too much sense, because it'd kind of be like he would do one thing and then he'd kind of contradict it a little bit later. And so it's not really like it's well thought out, all these different plot points and all the different progression of what happens. It reads very much like he's just thinking like, okay, let's see, what am I going to write today? Ooh, this would be a cool twist. But he didn't really think about like what he'd actually written before to make that twist make sense. And he didn't really think about like afterwards, like after doing that twist, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to have to make sure like the whole world or whatever, his whole book like fits with that theme or whatever. But then it seemed like he'd kind of just forget about it. So really, in a way, it felt like Philip K. Dick writing this book, he's really writing it just from the standpoint of, what could I write today? And it didn't matter like what he'd written previously, and it didn't matter what he would write the next day. He was just writing like chapter by chapter, moment by moment, whatever he wants to have happen that would, in his mind, be an interesting twist. But as a reader, it didn't really make a whole bunch of sense, because I'm trying to follow this book and follow the logic of it. And it's just like, it doesn't really fit together, really. So this is kind of a problem I'm having with Philip K. Dick's books in general, both The Man in the High Castle and this one. I think in part, I think I don't even really want to say he's a decent writer. He comes up with some things that seem like they could be good stories, like Man in the High Castle, like post World War II, where the Germans and Japanese won. Like, that's a great idea. Like, you could have a lot of fun with that. You could tell some good stories with that. But the stories he decides to tell were not very good, and just the way he handled that subject were not very good. And with this book, like, okay, there's post like global war and it's a dystopian society, but they're also advanced in a way. So, you know, it's not just like this is the last chance for humanity, humanity is doomed. No, most of humanity is on Mars, you know, and they're advanced, you know, but Earth, there's still some people remaining. So these are kind of like, you know, the last few, but there's also some advanced stuff with all this robotic stuff and all this synth stuff. So that is like, okay, that could be an interesting story. And there's like this bounty hunter. So how is he going to find all these synths and everything? So it's like, okay, it's kind of a cat and mouse game in a post like, you know, global war apocalypse, but also at the same time kind of advanced with all this robotics and stuff. So that seems like it's an interesting premise. Like you could tell a good story from that premise. But Philip K. Dick does not really. Just his decisions he makes, the characters he writes, the story he creates, the different like plot points he comes up with. It's just kind of weird and just not really good. So I think Philip K. Dick, you know, he starts out on these interesting premises, but he just doesn't really deliver on them, I believe. So, for instance, his main bounty hunter. I guess this is just going to be a real another small knock on the book. So, this guy, this protagonist, he really wants to buy another animal just because, you know, people really like animals, you know, because they prize them or whatever because they're so rare. And I think, you know, he wants to buy a robot animal because he doesn't have all that much money. And so basically to get the money to, you know, afford that, he would need to, you know, take out like 7 cents or whatever, or robots or whatever, androids. So then like that very same day, uh, like the main bounty hunter gets fatally injured or whatever. So this main bounty hunter like can step in and take over that guy's contracts. And there just happens to be like 7 new androids who just landed in the city. And that's like the bounty hunters can only kind of go so far. They kind of have like their own jurisdictions. And so just 7 androids just, you know, happen to kind of be in his district for him to hunt them down so he can get this robotic animal that he really likes. So just kind of that premise alone just kind of sounds like weird. So this guy wants to hunt all these synth, and I keep saying synths because of Fallout, and I'll actually get on that in a second. Androids, that's what they're called in the book. I don't even know what I was saying. So he wants money to buy a robot animal, and he just happens to get this contract for all these androids who just happen to show up in his city or whatever. So that's like real convenient, you know, and I just don't really like that so much in books when it's just like someone talks about something and that very day or the next day things perfectly happen, things perfectly align to help them go down that path. I don't know, it's just kind of annoying to me. But anyway, so this guy travels to Seattle, and that's actually something I mentioned previously when I like got this book. Is I was kind of flipping through it, and I saw there was a mention of Seattle, and I was like, "Ooh, Seattle is mentioned in this book. That's cool, you know, because I'm from Washington State." And so anyway, the scene in Washington State, it comes pretty early in the book. He goes up there because the Android company or whatever is headquartered in Seattle. So he goes there because there's this new generation of androids. And so there's a test that they could do to test to see if someone is an android or if they are a person. And basically, as soon as it got going and he's asking these questions, I realized, hey, that's a Fallout 4 reference. There's a city or town or settlement in Fallout 4, the video game, where you show up at this settlement covenant, I think it's called, and they administer a test. So they ask questions about, like, you know, such and such happens, what do you do? And so that is basically a Blade Runner or Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep reference in Fallout 4. So I thought that was real exciting. And also Fallout 4, the plot of that game is, you know, about synths and they're like, you know, amongst humans, and there's a lot of questions about if people are a synth or if synths are replacing humans. And so I just realized reading this book and reading that scene, like, oh, that's exactly used in Fallout 4. So that was kind of cool, picking up on that reference. So when I read that, I was kind of like, okay, because, he tests this woman to find out basically if the test works, to tell if she is a human or an android. And so when I read that scene and finished that scene, then he's kind of like, okay, now I need to go out and find, the 7 androids or whatever. I was kind of a little bit more excited because it's like, okay, this is going to be kind of interesting. Him applying this test on all these different androids. I keep always wanting to say synths. But this is kind of another plot point where the story just kind of loses its way. So the very first android he encounters, I'm going to have to put a moderate spoiler on this. So if you don't want to know the spoiler, go ahead and skip to the next chapter. So for the first android he encounters, he gets a call from his police department, whatever, headquarters, and they're kind of like, hey, there's this Soviet agent here who's on his way. He wants to join you to track down the android because they're whatever reason. And so the guy is like, okay, sure, send him over. Here's my coordinates, whatever. So this person shows up and gets in the car, and basically right away, real early on, the guy pulls a gun, and some way or another, basically the protagonist turns the tables and kills the guy, because that was apparently one of the androids that was the guy was after. The android showed up to kill him, and the protagonist outsmarted him kind of. And so kind of the problem there is it's like the protagonist didn't really do anything too much to stop that android. I mean, the android just showed up, tracked him down, and he didn't test him or anything. He just pulled a gun on him, and then the protagonist just shot him first, basically. So it was kind of underwhelming. It's like, darn it, I kind of wanted him to do that test or whatever. And then the second person he comes across who is suspected, gosh, okay. So he goes to confront this woman. He already actually has a list of all the potential androids, which is kind of also disappointing because it's like, he doesn't really have to find them so much. He already knows who they are. All he needs to do is test if they're humans or androids. So the next one on his list is this woman who is like a opera singer. And so he goes to meet with her, and she pulls a gun on him. She kind of tricks him and pulls a gun on him. And he kind of is like, he's like, oh, damn it, this is an android and she's going to kill me. But she doesn't. In fact, what she does is she calls a police officer, and that guy shows up, and I don't really want to go into it, but basically things happen and they take the protagonist to this other police department that's not the actual police department. So the guy is alarm bells are sounding, this is not legit, these are the androids. And I was just thinking, if these are the androids, why don't they just kill him? Why are they doing all this whatever about oh, we're gonna lie to you and take you off, and we're gonna take you here, and they're just kind of stringing him along. It's like, why wouldn't they just shoot him? When she pulls the gun on him, why doesn't she just shoot this guy? And when the other police guy shows up, why doesn't he just shoot the guy? And so they take him to this police department, and basically the captain or whatever of that police department tells the protagonist that I am an android. And so again, it's not something that the protagonist figures out. This character just tells the guy, flat out tells him, I am one of the ones on your list. And it's like, why would he tell him that? Why didn't he just kill this guy? He has him, he's captured, and they don't kill him. They just capture him and take him to this other building and just flat out tell him oh yes, we're androids. Everyone in this building is androids. But they just don't kill him when they have the chance. So it's not like he really did anything to, earn any kind of, victory or whatever. He didn't really outsmart these people or whatever. They got the drop on him. The woman got the drop on him when she pulled the gun on him, but she didn't kill him. And then the other, like, whatever, I forget exactly who all these people, like, I think there's only one of them that may be human. But basically, there's several androids here, and none of them kill the guy when they have the chance. So it's just like, that's real convenient plot armor here. If these androids are so dangerous, they should kill the guy as soon as they get the chance to, but they don't. So that really kind of makes the book weak, because it's like he doesn't really do anything to figure out who they are. They just like tell him like, oh yes, they just show up and like, I'm the android, but I'm not going to kill you first. I'm going to wait a few seconds and oh no, and then they get killed. And it's just kind of bad, I think. I hate in books and movies when the villains or henchmen or whatever basically, they have the hero dead to rights and they let them live for some reason, and then the hero comes back and kills them. It's just kind of a little bit weak, I think. So, like, why don't you kill them when you get the chance? I wish people would better explain that. If they're going to do that, there should be some more compelling reason why they don't kill the hero when they get the chance. I don't think it should be just like, oh, I'm going to let you live because, I just want to wait for like 5 minutes and I'm just going to talk to you and I'm going to tell you my plan and I'm just going to like kind of mock you a bit and then I'm going to turn my head and let you kill me. It's just weak. It's not good writing. Okay, and by this point, I was really kind of beginning to lose interest in the book just because from reading Man in the High Castle, I just saw this was heading the same direction. It's just like, I like the premise. There could be a good story here out of the premise, but Philip K. Dick, I think, just doesn't really have the ability or whatever to do much with it. Just his characters aren't interesting. His plots aren't interesting. His writing, I think, is not very good. For instance, I haven't really talked too much about his character, but I just don't really care about his protagonist. Like, he doesn't seem like he's a real empathetic guy that I care about. Like, first off, the first scene with his wife when they're talking about all their like different emotional stimulants or whatever, I didn't really understand it, but it sounded like he wanted his wife just to take a stimulant or whatever so she would be happy and basically compliant with him. But she's kind of like, no, I want to take I want to have a moody emotion or whatever. I want to be depressed and mad at you or whatever. And he's like, no, I'm just going to dial you up something where, you'll just be happy and silent and just whatever, And so that's just like, I don't really like this guy from the sound of it. And then, just the way he encounters all these different androids, he doesn't really use intelligence to like figure them out or anything. They just kind of get the drop on him and they pull the gun on him, and for whatever reason it doesn't work, and then the woman pulls the gun on him but she doesn't kill him, and then the police people, like the whole department of androids, they get him but they don't just immediately kill him. They tell him like, oh yes, we are all androids. Like, why tell him that? I mean, even if he knows that, why not just kill him? And there's so much more with it too. So the book felt, there was a lot of references, I guess, that I don't know how to explain it basically, other than like calling it like toxic masculinity or just, I don't know. But so there's the first scene with his wife where he's just like, oh, I'm just gonna, give you an emotion where, you'll just be whatever, I don't want to deal with you or whatever. There's also a line in the book where he says something like he wishes he would have just gotten rid of his wife years ago. Like, he just doesn't really enjoy her very much anymore. So that's what he says, I wish he would have just dropped her like 2 years ago or whatever. So obviously he doesn't care for her at all. And then there's like the main woman he meets in Seattle. She apparently comes back and like sleeps with the dude even though he's married. So he has an affair. He cheats on his wife. So that's another thing to not like about this dude. But that woman from Seattle, I don't want to say any spoilers, but repeatedly he talks about how like he doesn't really like her because she appears very childlike, like she's very flat chested and whatever. But like at least two or three times he uses like childlike to describe her. She's just like real small and yeah, childlike. But he still winds up sleeping with her, and it's like very clear he wants to. So he really wants to sleep with this childlike person, you know? And that's just like alarm bells. And again, not just, sleeping with this childlike woman, but also having the affair, cheating on his wife. And there's a few more other things with it. But yeah, so I just didn't like this dude. And I didn't really care about him and like his whole purpose or whatever. Baby, he really wants to get these androids so he can buy a robot animal. I just don't really care about all these robot animals. And I can understand Philip K. Dick was like trying to go for whatever, like, these people have all these, they really venerate or whatever all these different animals, whether they're real animals or robot animals. They really like them. Like that's a class symbol or whatever. If you can have an animal, that's your main thing is if you have an animal or not, and do you have a real animal. But at the same time, there's all these androids, and so there's kind of like, they're bad and they're evil, and the protagonist, just his job is to destroy them. And so it's kind of a story or whatever about empathy. They are cold soulless machines and he's going to kill them, but at the same time he's kind of a cold soulless machine because he's killing them without caring. Except there's like one or two instances where there's androids, female androids, where he kind of doesn't want to kill them and he feels regret about killing them because like he sees value in them, and the reason he sees value in them is because he wants to sleep with them. I guess that's problematic because I mean, what if like the android like just seriously just wanted to do some kind of menial job or whatever, and this bounty hunter shows up out of the blue and is like, I'm gonna kill you. And it's like the android is like, hey, I just want to be a farmer or whatever. But no, there's no androids like that. There's just the androids who want to kill the guy, and then there's androids who are like attractive women, and he doesn't really want to kill them because he wants to sleep with them. So in a way, this guy is empathetic. He's almost robotic himself. And in fact, there's like plot points in the book about if he actually is an android. But then there's like this other character who is also, they wonder if this other character is an android or if he's human. And so this protagonist like does a test on this guy, and he kind of concludes like this guy is actually like a sociopath. He like enjoys killing the androids. And I was just like, it's almost like it's written where it's trying to draw a parallel, because at the same time it's talking about how the protagonist, he kind of feels bad about killing the androids because, they're attractive women. So it's like, oh, damn, I could have slept with her. But at the same time, he's kind of like to this other guy is like, dude, you get off on this. You enjoy killing these androids, you're sociopathic, you're cold, emotionless. But so is this protagonist. I mean, come off it, dude. The only reason you like these androids is because you want to sleep with them only so long as they're childlike. Like, this dude is a freak. So, anyway, I think I'm pretty much wrapping it up here. I just don't really like Philip K. Dick's writing. I don't really like his characters. I've never met any character in his books that I really like. There's no characters I root for. His plots, there's always so many things going on that it seems like, okay, you could flesh these things out to make an interesting, compelling story here, but he just doesn't. They're just kind of weird little plot points. It's kind of like one day he's like, okay, I'll come up with this plot point, and then he just kind of moves on. And he may come back to it, but he may not. And if he does come back to it, I don't know. I just don't really like Philip K. Dick's writing, his storytelling, his characters, his premises I think are okay, like post World War II, where the Japanese and Germans win. That's cool. This post, World War where there's androids and all this stuff and bounty hunting. Even the plot about like the the robotic animals and stuff and real animals, you could do something with that. But I just don't think Philip K. Dick did anything good with it, really. So I'm kind of really getting a negative opinion on Philip K. Dick. Like, I like some of his premises, but I don't like what he does with them. So anyway, rating it. I think I can only really give it 2 stars just for effort. I don't really see anything in the book that would deserve giving it an extra star. 2 stars is just kind of the standard. It's not a book like I utterly hated it. There were parts that I thought were like, okay, this could be interesting here. All of these different plots about like, okay, you have the androids masquerading as humans. That's an interesting concept. You could play around with that. There's this post-World War society where Earth is mostly destroyed, but there's also some advanced stuff because like we've colonized Mars and all this stuff, and there's robotics, and there is like flying cars and all that. So it's not just like, total apocalyptic world. There's still some advanced stuff here. And there's just a lot of interesting things you could do with it, but Philip K. Dick didn't really do anything interesting with it. It's just kind of boring and bland characters. I didn't really like the characters. I didn't really like his plotting and just the different cliffhangers and the way he would find the next android and they just get the jump on him, but they don't kill him, but they still tell him like, yes, we are the androids. It's like, why? It's just kind of bad. So yeah, 2 stars for Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Again, with that title, I love that title, but even that title, it didn't feel like there was like well thought out, because I mean, it's not answered. Do androids dream of electric sheep? I don't know. I just didn't really like this book. So yeah, I don't think I really like Philip K. Dick. I might still try to read the We Can Remember It For You Wholesale book or whatever that was used to make the film Total Recall. I think that was just a novella or a short story. I would be willing to read that just to see how it compares with the movie. And also, that is a movie I've actually seen. I have not seen any of the Man in the High Castle shows or any of the Blade Runner films. So I think the Total Recall book I would be most interested in, because I am most familiar with all the characters and plot of that story. I will, of course, I suppose, try to read the other book on the top 1000 list for Philip K. Dick, the Three Stigmata book. I don't know exactly if that's a short story or a novel. But I think that will about do it. Oh, so my plan was to actually buy the original Blade Runner movie, because I guess the movie is kind of highly regarded and a lot of filmmakers and stuff cite it as one of their favorite movies. Like, I think Guillermo del Toro, one of my favorite directors, he really likes the Blade Runner movie. It's starring Harrison Ford. I think it was made in 82 or something. So I was curious about watching it, but I just really didn't like the book so much, so it kind of kills my interest in the movie. But I don't know, because I do like the film Total Recall, so I mean, I think you could make a good adaptation of a Philip K. Dick book or whatever. But I think to do it, you would have to kind of deviate from what Philip K. Dick did. Same thing with Man in the High Castle. I mean, you might want to change the title. You might want to change the premise. You may want to change the characters. Basically, you may want to change basically everything about the book except the bare bones of the premise. Anyway, I feel I am losing my voice, so I better go. So, thank you guys for watching. Hope to see you in another video. Bye.
2, 3, 4.